Hi everybody, I was adjusting my lighting because apparently Instagram was not picking up my lighting the same way that my camera was when I was testing it earlier. So we're going to give it a little bit of time just to see if we can get some more people on here so that they can get ready to go in case some people were having some trouble with the time change or anything like that. But yeah, thanks guys for joining us. We're so excited to have you guys here. I'm not Afton, so if you guys have been joining us for our other live streams that we've been having, our wonderful hostess Afton, adult frontless buyer Afton was doing all of these wonderful author events, and we're so excited to have her on. She was doing great. She was talking about how she's not in this front-facing position so much, but she was wonderful. So yay for her. But my name's Mikaley. I'm the Director of Marketing and Events at Tattered Bookstore, and we're so excited to have you guys on. Just thank you 1,000 times over for your continued support and for your just love and willingness to help one another and help your favorite businesses during this crazy time. So we can't tell you how much we're grateful for that. So like I said before, my name's Mikaley. I'm the Director of Marketing and Events here at Tattered Bookstore. We're just giving it a little bit of time until we get started. I can give you some updates about Tattered Cover here. So Tattered Cover, if you guys haven't heard, we've transitioned to online only because of Colorado's stay-at-home order. We are suspending curbside pickup, which means that we are delivery only, shipping only, and if you need to make an adjustment on a previous order or something, you guys can always email books@tatteredcover.com. They're the best ones to help handle all of this online ordering that we've got going on, and thank you for your patience as we transition into that type of business, which is just a whole different ball of wax, but we're happy to still serve you in this community and still serve the nation by being a place where books can still be sold. Because I think they're essential items. I think a lot of you think that too. So the phone lines are down. Really, email's the best way to do it. You can always ask us questions on our social media as well. We're happy to help you out that way too. And you know, this is our third live stream author event, which is very, very exciting. We are hoping to plan some more later. They're not all going to be fiction, so we've got some history books coming out. We've got some nonfiction. We've got some trying to work on a humor. We'll see if we can get some more really awesome authors here for you guys. But I'm excited for this one today. So please keep an eye up on our social media, on our events page, tatteredcover.com, because that's where all of that is going to be. And we're going to continue to host these author events. And I'm going to reiterate something that my colleague Afton said beforehand. She talked about art as a survival resource. I talked about books being essential items. And art really is, I think, what's getting us through the majority of this pandemic right now. And it's bringing people together. I mean, there's a great group of you on here already. And we think that it's vitally important. And we're here to affirm that creative work that's being given to us by these authors, and, you know, serving you and being a place where that art can grow and thrive and be shared is a priority of ours, and it will always be a priority of ours. And, you know, we've picked authors that we're really excited about, and we can't stand the idea that they weren't gonna have a platform because of this pandemic. Like, Jessica Anthony was supposed to be in the store today, and I was gonna host her event because, again, I loved her book so much, and so we're really excited to have her on right now. And so we believe that our communities need books and need independent bookstores right now and need our neighborhood businesses. So thank you guys for continuing that support. Just an FYI, we are going to post this later on YouTube to enable closed captioning and to have that as a record. It will be available on our Instagram for the next 24 hours, and then, like I said, we'll move it to YouTube. We are planning more live streams. Like I said, we haven't confirmed all of them yet. We're hoping to kind of do this on a weekly basis for you guys, because I know people are starving for content right now, which a lot of that does indeed include books. So yes, more live streams from authors. Yes, please. We completely agree. But this one that we have here today, I'm so stoked for her latest book, Enter the Aardvark. Jessica Anthony was born in upstate New York, in a small agricultural community sandwiched between a Native American reservation and a cutlery factory, which is one of the best opening lines to a bio that I've ever heard. Her fiction has appeared in Best New American Voices, Best American Non-Required Reading, McSweeney's, Mid-American Review, on and on. She's the winner of the Amanda Davis Highwire Fiction Award, and she, oh my gosh, she's been a fellow at the MacDowell Colony, Malay Colony, and she lives in Portland, Maine, currently. And we are just so excited to have her on, and I'm going to accept her request to join us, and we'll get our author event started here. So let me just really quick do that. And we'll see. There's always like a new level of stress that comes with author events. There he is!
Hey!
Hello!
Hello!
Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Mikaley. This is wild. This is my first Instagram Live experience
Yay!
ever.
Welcome, you did it. You were stellar.
Well, it's tremendous. It's tremendous what you guys are doing for authors. I mean, let me just speak for all of us and say thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to talk about our books that are coming out during this time. It was quite a disappointment to miss out on coming to Tattered Cover in Denver. So I'm just as thrilled as you are to be here. So
yay!
Yeah.
I'm so happy to hear that. Thank you guys for just, like I said, continuing to create and being so wonderful during this time. We know how hard it is for you. So this is something that's within our control that we can do. And so we're just happy to have you. And like I said, I was such a huge fan of Enter the Aardvark that it was, this one was a hard event for me to miss. So I'm glad that we're doing this right now.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, well, so I want to just start because this book has such an interesting elevator pitch and such an interesting start, but I'd love to hear from you, what is Enter the Aardvark? What is it about?
Yeah, well, Enter the Aardvark is about a young millennial GOP congressman from Virginia who's running for reelection. And one hot August morning, he opens his front door and he receives a very large delivery from FedEx, which is a gigantic taxidermied aardvark. And the arrival of this aardvark hastens a chaotic series of escalating events that bring down his entire campaign.
This book is so wonderful because it's not the biggest book in the world. It's not home, so to speak, but it just doesn't stop. Like the stakes get higher and higher, and in a way it gets crazier and crazier when you don't think that it can. And there's I think a publicist or an editor has a note to the reader in the advanced reader copy that I have, and she talks about that you were a bridge guard when you got this idea, and that there was a snippet of poetry that's inspired it. Can you speak on that for a little bit?
Sure. Well, I'll often write from sentences or from just sort of scraps of poetry. There's the surrealist poet Andre Breton would call it a waking sentence. And so it's just a gathering of words that feel alive to you for some reason. And you feel that, a number of questions begin to be raised in your mind about the potentiality of story around a simple phrase. And so this phrase kind of occurred to me way back in 2012. I just thought of Enter the Aardvark, sort of a strange thing to think about. And I sat with it for 3 years. And then it wasn't until, for a while. And then in 2015, I sort of had the hankering to engage, in fiction, a little bit of what I was starting to see in the run-up to the 2016 election. I thought I might attempt some kind of a political story And I also had this opening phrase of language: a whirling mass of vapors is unhinged, hurtling through outer space for an infinity until it collides with an ellipsis, which does not let go. And then, yeah, it's just like this thrust of language. And I realized that these two kind of, peripheral voices were actually speaking to each other. They belonged together. And so I entered into that voice, which carried me through the evolution of the aardvark, and that's how the novel begins. But I think I forgot the other part of what you just asked me.
I was asking about being a bridge guard.
Oh, being a bridge guard, yeah.
Because that's what she said. Got the idea. Like, what is that? What were you doing?
Well, the bridge guarding actually happened after I had completed sort of like I was pretty well into the novel. I wrote the first draft very quickly in about 6 weeks. Then it just kind of expanded as I was working on it for a couple of years. And then, yeah, I applied for a position to guard a bridge in Slovakia. It's right on the border of Hungary. It's over the Danube. There's a 500-meter, 5-tier arch bridge called the Maria Valeria Bridge. And I'll give you just the brief story of the bridge. The bridge was blown up in World War I. Mm-hmm. And then it was rebuilt. Then the Nazis completely obliterated it in World War II. And so it was left destroyed. There was no passage. There was no means of communication between Sturdovo, Slovakia, and Esztergom, Hungary. And people had family in both locations. Actually, like 80% of the Slovakians in Sturdovo are Hungarian. And so finally, at the end of the late 90s, the communities decided to rebuild the bridge. It was reconstructed in October of 2001. And they started the Bridge Guard program, which is bringing one artist at a time to serve as a guard for the bridge against fascism, any further violence to the bridge through the act of creation. So it's a wild experience. I mean, these were some long, slow days, Mikaley.
I'm sure.
Let me tell you, I mean, being by yourself in rural Slovakia for 3 months, I mean, there was like this like rock club across from where I was living. And so like every Friday night they would play Metallica covers, So I was like writing Enter the Aardvark, listening to Enter Sandman over and over and over again. Yeah.
That is one of the most unique writing soundtracks I think any author has talked about.
I wouldn't recommend it to virtually anyone. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I can't imagine it. But what a really cool story to accompany this story that came out of that experience for you. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say the novel. So half of it takes place in a kind of hyperbolized contemporary Washington D.C. So we're in present day, but then the other half of the novel takes place in like sort of a farcical Victorian England.
Yes.
And so the concept of bridging narratives became just really revitalized for me. I was serving as bridge guard and had bridges very much on mind. Yeah.
And that's fantastic too. And I'm glad that you brought up the two sides of the story, so to speak, because while Alexander is the sort of the main thread in it, there are these great scenes in 1875-ish. And with Titus Downing is one of the characters there, who's the taxidermist.
Yes.
But I'm curious because you do have these two really unique voices. Alexander's actually told in second person, which was fascinating to me. Mm-hmm. And then you have Titus's story, and then he has Titus's story that weaves in through third person. And I'm curious to what drew you to these two voices across time, and then why second person?
Yeah, so
I'll
just say that I'll start paying attention in a way that I felt as a human being I had to be paying attention to politics. But I was also imagining just the sound of what a hipster politician might actually be like if I were to try and capture it sonically, like the millennial hipster, so you're in like a coffee shop and you're listening to people kind of speak to one another, and then it's just like so totally obvious the way, and I'm saying that deliberately, the way that you have to sink into that kind of affect of kind of like contemporary hipster speech. And so I was wondering, I was thinking like, my goodness, like what if this guy were actually a congressman? He spoke this way. And so suddenly this drive of voice just sort of all locked together, and it made total sense to me. And the second person was, it was a deliberate choice, but it was a quick choice because I started out working in the first person for Alex, and I just didn't feel like there was any room for me. I wasn't interested in spending that much time, I guess, in the psyche of someone who really kind of at a very base level just wouldn't give a shit about my life. And so I wanted to kind of situate myself where I could watch Alex and observe him and both indict him and also empathize with him. And the second person is a natural point of view for that choice, right? And then, then in 1875, Victorian England, I was thinking about a sort of a pastiche or a hybrid of like the postmodern kind of cynicism deployed upon a voice that is kind of fairly Jamesian, right? The historical passages that follow Titus Downing, the taxidermist who stuffs the aardvark, they feel quite modern, but also, I mean, at least I hope in my ear, they also kind of carry that essence of Victorian speech, of Victorian sort of linguistic performance. And so just as someone who is kind of like interested in how words collide, those two modes really made sense for Titus Downing, and they could really only occur effectively in the third person because I was speaking back to the point of view that was used predominantly in Victorian literature, which is kind of omniscience. And so to have a kind of like, a postmodern Victorian omniscience was fun. I enjoyed it. Oh, I can't hear you. I can't hear you. Oh, not sure why.
Yeah.
Oh, can you hear me now? Oh, got you. Oh. Shoot, I think we're quiet.
That's a tie back to just Victorian literature. Oh no.
I think we're okay. We're on a little bit of a delay. I think we're okay.
Let's try.
Okay.
Okay. There we go. Working on it. Technical difficulty. No, we're still live. Can you hear me now?
No. We're in time when I see you, but I can't, it's like the sound is delayed for
We'll just pause a little between our sentences.
Okay. Good idea.
So I'm curious about Jeremy too, because you had to obviously do research in the 1800s, but then
you just asked me about taxidermy. Can you hear me? Okay. So you asked a question about taxidermy and kind of the process of research.
How about now?
Yeah. So, I mean, I obviously, I had to learn quite a bit about Victorian strategies for taxidermy writing this novel.
Yes.
Yes. One of the joys of writing fiction is that, you really get the opportunity to kind of, inhabit all different kinds of personas and worlds and jobs that, really have, no immediate bearing on your normal life here in 2020. And so, to write a Victorian taxidermist meant I was going to have to learn obviously about his profession, but I became really interested in sort of his tools and also in the way that taxidermy was operating for him as much as sort of like as a philosophy or a theory as it was a practice. And I became kind of compelled by the way that he really, to me, became alive as an artist, recreating the full life and an image of these stuffed creatures, these stuffed animals. And so even though when we think about taxidermy now, there's something obviously macabre about it, and if it's done badly, it's horrific. It's comedic almost, you know, to see really awful taxidermy. I think there's a Twitter page or a Twitter feed that's all like bad. It's called like bad taxidermy or something, and it's just these horrible faces. But no, I mean, there's something really quite amazing about the ability to actually, like, as a human being, recreate the appearance of a natural animal. And so I wanted to, I don't know, to give some value to that instinct to kind of recreate a life. It seemed oddly sort of like what a fiction writer would do. There's something very similar about this notion of, I don't know, stuffing a beast and creating a character. I mean, I found these crap taxidermy. Thank you, Northshire Books. That's the site. Yeah, there's something really marvelous about these parallels between art making and taxidermy. So that's where I found sort of, I don't know, the most interest for me, I suppose. I mean, I found this marvelous document called Practical Taxidermy by a fellow named Montague Brown that was published in Britain in the 1870s. And so that became, you know, a useful document for me for the novel. But by and large, I'm not interested in kind of like a literal translation as a novelist. My job isn't just to convey information. I'm telling a story. And so, you know, the sort of simulacra and the verisimilitude of the experience of the taxidermy was more interesting to me than the literal truth of what it would have been. Yeah.
I don't know. One of the things that I really enjoyed, can you hear me still?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, good. So one of the things that I found really interesting about the book too was that the way that you wove the two storylines together. They seemed so different at the start, but then you had this really great mirror effect of some of the events that were happening in the modern day and some of the things that were happening in the 1800s. And I was curious if you could talk about, you know, constructing this plot and how, no, truly, but like how you decided to put what scene when and really piecing these two seemingly different stories together into this one really exciting and wild book.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
You know, I love this question in many ways because, you know, I don't construct plot. I don't deliberately set out and say, all right, you know, this is what's going to happen. This is the story that I'm designing. I just allow myself to feel what my characters feel. And then have faith, an extraordinary amount of faith that it's all going to somehow work out okay. It's, I don't know, there's something quite mystical about it that I'll just say, you know, all I can say that I've learned about plot is that it's naturally born out of the desires that your characters have. And so when their desire meets logic, that's plot. I mean, It's just whatever, you know, whatever makes sense to happen next is the thing that's going to happen next. And, you know, I think the challenge for many writers who are certainly starting out or working on their first books is sort of when you confront that place where, you know, you've driven your narrative sort of as far as you can and you can't really see the ending, you know, or you feel as though you've written yourself into an abyss, or the story is just sort of like falling apart at your fingertips. And I can speak to this because it's happened to me many times. You know, I would just say that all that means is that you have to give yourself a little bit of time to sit back and say, well, what just happened? You know, like, What is it that I've actually written and what makes sense to come next? And then if you allow yourself, you know, the faith to kind of follow the logic of the instinct of what should happen next, it will surprise you. Your story will surprise you. It seems to me. There are two really wonderful short stories that I love to return to talk about this. And one is Brownies by ZZ Packer, a story from a while ago, from like 2000. But the collection is called Drinking Coffee Elsewhere. And it's just a brilliant story because she introduces a complication that, raises all kinds of questions in the reader's mind. And then as the plot kind of develops, and this is only in a 15-page story, she continues to turn the fiction. And the word that I use to talk about this is narrative subversion, which comes from the Latin. My mother's a Latin teacher, so I'm going to be talking about Latin. I'm sorry, everyone.
Don't say sorry. You're good.
But it comes from, it's subvertere, right? Are the two Latin words that speak to plot making. And so that means to turn from below. And so while you're writing a story, there's something that's always quietly, in a kind of a subterranean way, turning from below in your fiction. And you really don't know what's turning. You're just writing your story about, this aardvark.
Aardvarks, yeah.
About your aardvark, that needs to get returned to your gay lover. But so there's something else going on underneath, the story. It's the subtext. And so, when you get to that place in the fiction where you say, what logically needs to happen next, that's when the subtext begins to kind of rise up and present itself to you. It's always a thrill when that happens. It's really exciting. Yeah.
I just feel like we just need to be like Jessica Anthony's masterclass in plot. No, but it's true, because that was just so informative, but it also made total sense. You can relate that to a lot of different types of storytelling. Sure. And I think that's so fascinating. And
the other story is Colin McCann's Shakol.
I was going to ask you, but I was like,
sorry. The second story is Colin McCann's Shakol. It's brilliant. Yeah.
Well, and I always find short story authors so fascinating, because they manage to encompass so much, and in such a short amount of time, which is what I found with yours as well. I'm often known for reading these huge fantasy books that are, like I said before, tomes, but then there's just this brilliant delight of a fast-paced, almost like a play in my head. I was feeling like it was so just like a French doors farce, how they would come in and out and all these different things kept happening. And even Enter the Aardvark feels like a stage direction.
Sure. Well, it's
that's my background is theater.
Yeah,
so
no, I love that. I love knowing this about you. I feel like now we can be friends,
Absolutely. When this quarantine's over, we'll go get coffee and
there we go.
Whatever next book you've got.
That sounds great.
So let's take a step back to the political side of it, because I'm curious about it. It feels very much like a political satire, and the way that you sort of have this behind the scenes destruction of his political career the minute this aardvark enters.
Yeah.
And I'm curious about writing a political satire in today's political climate.
Sure.
And how, because this is obviously, it's its own world, so to speak, and its own, it's not right in what's going on in today's society. But I'm curious just to where that desire came from. What did you do any sort of research in what's going on, or like how did that feel to you writing it when this world right now feels full of political satire?
Yeah, well, it was hugely fun to write, because I think sometimes as a writer or an artist, you feel sort of like, well, how am I contributing? How am I helping folks?
Yeah.
What can I do? And so what of course you can do, you can write. You can write a novel that pays attention to what's happening. This is the first fiction that I've written that really kind of embraced a contemporary sound and pop culture, and the sort of the thrust of the media and cancel culture. All of that is in Enter the Aardvark, and it's still around. I mean, so it was here in 2015 when I wrote the first draft, and it's still here. It's stuck with us. And I would just say, in terms of the politics, like, this is a hyperbolic tale.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I've been thinking about it. It's like it's a hyperbolic tale for hyperbolic times. And one of the challenges of writing a satire in a time when satire kind of fails us because everything is so outlandish and ridiculous. Every single day, there's some new monstrosity that feels like it doesn't belong to this country. It feels, I don't know what it feels like.
Tiger
like
King, sorry.
Yeah, it's madness. You know, so, you know, as a novelist who is trying to, in some ways, lampoon a culture that is actively lampooning itself,
Yes.
You find yourself in some ways doing what SNL did with Sarah Palin. You remember?
Oh my gosh.
That classic SNL where she just, you know, Tina Fey just went on SNL and she just read the words that Sarah Palin spoke, right? I mean,
Yes.
and in that she was offering up a kind of larger than life commentary, like larger than satire, to hold a mirror up to us all and say, what are we allowing to happen? How is this possible? And so in some ways, you know, the tone of the book was kind of flirting with that sensibility a little bit, to sort of say, yes, I am satirizing, you know, this millennial GOP Ronald Reagan worshiper.
We're going to get to that.
Yeah, but there was also something, you know, that feels, at least to me as the author, quite true about it. Like there's not, I guess it's not as far-fetched to imagine a guy like Alex Wilson actually parading around DC. I mean, he's not that far off, it seems to me.
I feel like I probably went to high school with somebody who became that. Like that's how that feels. And I know. But it was very familiar. And I think that you definitely hear that in the tone very clearly in the book throughout. But also you hear it a little bit in the scandal that happens in the Victorian times too.
Sure.
And how that is mirrored. It's not so much as the media is up front in your face, but that cancel culture, that, I don't know, that dire sense of my reputation will be ruined in 5 seconds flat if people find out about
absolutely
this secret or that secret. And so it's very interesting how, again, those are basic human instincts that apply to both timelines.
Yeah, that's great. I love that.
Yeah, you're welcome. That's great and work right there. But let's talk about Reagan, because you bring that up, and that I feel like that every time, because again, in Alexander's voice, he has a ridiculous obsession with Reagan, and again, hyperbolic. I have to know, there's like, he talks about some of these items that he has acquired that were supposedly of Reagan's. Are those real? Did you research them? Are they made up? Like, did you full image Reagan's couch? Like, where did that come from?
Yeah, well, there's actually a book. Gosh, do I have it around here? It's somewhere. It's called Images of Greatness, the Presidency of Ronald Reagan. And so, you know, some of, the vial of Reagan's blood. No, that's actually true.
That one. I'm glad North China.
You know, yeah, I mean, there were you know, elements in the Reagan collection that definitely were, you know, snatched right out of images that I'd seen of Reagan. And then there were also elements of just whimsy, you know, that I thought felt correct and appropriate for, you know, what Alex would want to collect, you know, with Ronald Reagan. But the Reagan, it appeared very early on in the writing of the novel, this Reagan worship. And it just was one of these kinds of aspects of the GOP psyche that I found just so perpetually fascinating, this obsession with Ronald Reagan. I mean, it's like the man is like a god. And I don't know, I mean, I was younger during the Reagan presidency, and I always remember him like on television as just being sort of a goofy guy, you know? And I remember, like, you know, children are really intuitive. And I remember just sort of like hearing sort of the lies in his voice. I mean, I didn't know that he'd been an actor or an entertainer.
Right.
But there was just something really disingenuous about his character that kind of sort of stayed with me. And of course, you know, there are really, if you sit back and you really like examine that presidency, what you take away, at least, you know, hey, this is me. Feel free to disagree with me, folks. What I take away is, you know, Reagan really just creating dramatic tax cuts for the wealthy that continue to endure, and Reagan allowing for, the fairness doctrine to happen. So suddenly we are now allowed to have a media space where Americans are being lied to every day. I mean, to me, those are the two biggest elements of that political legacy. And so I don't know, this dramatic worship of Reagan as, a man god, a jelly bean eating man god. Just, I don't know. I was interested in that. Like, I started to wonder, I mean, if you really were to take this Reagan worship and blow it up, sort of satirically, you would have someone who wanted to have the exact same scarf, those shoes, that vest. And, it's so closely born to Alex Wilson's own political ambitions, which are really drawn purely from vanity, I mean,
absolutely.
He's just this unfiltered, vain, and, ambitious young man who is totally uninterested in hearing the voices of the people that he represents. He is just purely trying to appeal to Mitch McConnell.
Yep, yeah. That's it. Yes. Which you, of course, having written him, would know better than anyone else. But yes, you as the reader definitely feel that. But what I love, though, is that in some ways you do find yourself empathizing with him, because he goes through some stuff. You put him through the ringer, and yet you are able to find some humanity in this very vain, very ambitious, yet Slytherin-like character and I found that very interesting, because you can write somebody that the reader might hate and dislike, but what about Alex did you as a writer like, that you wanted to put into this story and that you could make the reader empathize with him?
Well, I simply liked thinking about my own hope for him, which is sort of like my own hope for all of us. I just returned to the basic fact that he's a human being who has, willfully repressed his own desire and ability to love. And that has consequences. And there are consequences that are for all of us, because he votes against all of the policies, that support human rights in this country. But the person who really is suffering the most, of course, is himself. So he is a politician who is voting against his own interests, and he doesn't even know it, And so, I don't know, there's something profoundly sad and tragic about that, it seems to me. And so, to bring him to a place where he is confronted or offered an opportunity to wake up and to realize that the way that he thought, ambition and vanity was going to work for him, well, it's not going to work out for him that way, because it's not who he is. It's not what he needs, And so, I have no answers for this character. All I know is that he's now been given an opportunity, right? And and that I like to think that all of us as human beings are still, even though we are in this wretched and divisive time, we are still, I hope, hoping for the best for one another, and we're rooting for each other to figure it out and to get through it. There's a lot of noise in the way, but I think to give up on this hope means that we're entering into a pretty sad state of affairs, right? It's pretty grim. And so weirdly, it becomes an optimistic novel, I think.
It does.
Yeah.
Well, on that lovely note, we're going to go to some of the questions that were submitted by viewers. And so one of them was, do you have a favorite word? And if so, what is it?
A favorite word?
Yes.
Wow. Gosh, that's a really hard question. I think my favorite word is a German word, and it's Schnurrbart. It's the German word for mustache. I just really like saying the German word for mustache. Schnurrbart. I don't know, there's something marvelous about it.
One of my favorites is in another language is pantuflas, which is slippers.
Oh.
Las pantuflas.
That's a good one. Pantuflas. That's good.
I love that you picked one from another language. That's fantastic. Do you speak other languages? Having been at Bridge Guard, was that a requirement or?
Well, yeah, I mean, I lived in Prague for a while, and so I do speak a little bit of Czech. I studied some German in college, and I have a little bit of French. But I mean, it's pathetic. It's all like, my Czech is like, prosím, which is like, watch your step as you are exiting and entering the tram. You know, like that's basically what it means. You know, so it's like, it's really pathetic. It's pathetic foreign language. But, you know, as I said, you know, my mother was a Latin teacher. So I think like languages and just kind of paying attention to language, it was born in me early. It was implanted in me early. Thanks, Mom.
There you go. Awesome. So what are you reading right now in your time of quarantine? What is sparking your interest?
Yeah, I actually just started Journal of My Plague Year by Daniel Defoe from 1722, writing about the bubonic plague. Yeah, writing about the bubonic plague in London that happened in the late 1600s, and when Defoe was 5 years old. But it's a first-person narrative, even though technically it's nonfiction. And it's fascinating to see the comparisons between the ways that people are talking about the coronavirus and the way that people were talking about the plague, you know, in England in the early 1700s. It's really interesting. Yeah.
That's so cool. I admire those people that can read something like that in this time of crisis. I'm definitely an escapist, but like my boyfriend is reading this YA series about dystopian destroyed by a pandemic, and I'm like, really? Right now? So I love that you are courageous enough to read that. But like you said, hopefully it's informative. Maybe it'll offer a little bit of hope at the end.
Yeah.
So what does a typical writing day look like for you?
Well, I mean, when it's going well and I have the time set aside, yeah. When I'm drafting, it's very different from when I'm revising. When I'm drafting, I will get up and I will get a cup of coffee and sit down at my desk and I will work for 4 hours, usually about 4 hours. When I'm writing a novel, I give myself 1,000 words a day. So, you know, usually it's about 4 hours, but, you know, sometimes it happens faster than that, and then I like accrue words. So it's like sometimes I'll like actually get 2,000 words down, and then I have like a free day. I'll have like a day off, you know, for myself, so that's nice. But revision actually, it helps to be either in the middle of the afternoon to revise, because I think that's when we're hardest on ourselves, into the early evening. But I guess time of day matters a lot for me. I don't really know why, but there's something I need to, you know, about in drafting, to just get up first thing and sit down and work. Yeah.
No, you are not alone in an author really being specific about their time of day. We've heard that in a lot of interviews about like, oh, I have to write in the morning. I can only write after my kids are asleep, or, you know, so it's a really interesting theme. And I love the idea that you're hardest on yourself in the afternoon.
Yeah, something happens to your mind at like 2 p.m. You're just, you know, you're tougher.
You're just done.
Yeah.
What's next for you? Are you working on anything right now?
Right now I'm doing a lot of work for this novel, but I have started thinking about my next book. I think it'll be a novel. I have a potential waking sentence, you know.
Yay.
And so yeah, I think after you know, we move through the spring, stay through, hibernate through the spring, then, you know, I'll have a bit of time, I hope, this summer to really get started. But I actually just got into a really cool residency at Mount Vernon. They have, thank you. It's really fun. You go to Mount Vernon and you live there for a month and you study George Washington. So I don't know. Next April I'll be at Mount Vernon for a month. That's going to be really fun. I'm looking forward to that. Yeah.
Congratulations. That's amazing.
Oh, thanks.
Awesome.
I didn't mean to say anything boastful. I'm just really fun. I'm just genuinely excited about it. It's like really fun.
Jessica, this is your event. You're allowed to be celebrating your book. It's okay. Well, no, that's awesome to hear. And then what do you have any advice to aspiring to writers who are hoping to get published, developing their craft, Maybe like something that you were told as a writer that you would like to share?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends what stage you're at, right? If you're just starting and you sort of just want to get better as a writer, I mean, I would just say you must read. That's it. That's the best thing you can do is just read and read a lot and have patience with yourself while you fail, because you will. But you know, as Beckett said, right? I mean, you start to fail better. You know, you try again, fail again, fail better. And there's a lot of truth to that, it seems to me. And I also would not compete with other writers. You know, you may find yourself in various writing communities, and people you know may start to have a story published or taken somewhere, and you know, you may feel a sense of anxiety that, you know, your work hasn't gotten any attention yet, or, you know, what have you. And I would just say, really, the bottom line is none of that matters, right? I mean, the only thing that matters is the relationship you have to your own art. That's it. And George Saunders actually put this beautifully once when he said that every writer has their own arc, you know. And I know brilliant novelists who didn't start writing until they were 50. They didn't start until they were 50. You know, I know brilliant writers and novelists who started, you know, young, and they got a lot of attention very quickly. And then they stopped writing, you know, by the time they were 30 or whatever. I mean, so I think, you know, you have to find a pace that works for you. And you know, you need to be honest about the work that you're making and how it's being made and what really gives you the most pleasure. I mean, the bottom line is that this should be a rich and rewarding experience for you. It shouldn't be I mean, yes, we're all ambitious and we're jerks, but we also, you know what I mean? Like, there's that side of you that's like that thing that's like, you know, publish.
Everybody's got it.
You know, publish. But you know, this novel took me a while, and it took me a while because that's just how long it took. I mean, you know, I could never have rushed this novel into existence. You know, it needed. You know, my last book before this came out in 2012, which was a graphic novel. And so this little story, this 190-page fiction needed, you know, a long simmering time, you know, before it willed itself into existence. And so I would just say, you know, be patient with yourselves, folks. Yeah.
Well, we're really, really glad that you gave it that gestation period and let us enjoy this amazing book that came out last Tuesday, a week from today. And we have copies available at tatteredcover.com, and you guys can go and order that from us. It is, like I said, I picked it up on a whim. It is very different than what I read, but I'm so glad that I did. And I know that there are other staff members who are reading it as well. And we just really can't thank you enough, Jessica, for coming on here and celebrating your book with us.
Thank you for having me so much. This was so much fun. Thank you so much.
It was so much fun. So yeah, whenever you get that next novel, we'll have you actually come into Denver that time. So
I would love that. I would love that.
Well, keep an eye out on social media for other events that Jessica's doing, as well as other events that are up and coming at Tattered Cover. Continue to support local businesses.
Support local businesses.
Yay! Ordering from local restaurants, all of that. Thank you guys so much. We really appreciate you here at Tattered Cover, and just happy reading.
Thank you again,
Jessica.
Bye.
Bye.